Welcome to our February 2nd, 2021 Lone Tree City Council study session. We're having a couple technical challenges with some of our call-in presenters to our virtual meeting. So just ask you for a little patience with us as we all still are adapting and pivoting to the changes of 2020 and 2021 now. So this meeting is being held in accordance with our virtual meeting policy, Council adopted policy number 20-01. Members of the public may join our meeting virtually from a computer or their smartphone. There is a link identified on the city website, www.cityoflonetree.com, if you would like to join us this evening. There's links right on our city council agenda that will take you to our meeting, and then also to allow you to click and ask for a little technical support. Our city council does not vote during our study sessions, since presentations are for information and discussion only. Therefore, there is no public comment during our study session. I am very sad to let everyone know that our Mayor Pro Tem Brunick will not be joining us this afternoon for our study session. Unfortunately, she has a significant health issue with a member of her family, and she is dealing with that. So we're sending her our prayers and our thoughts for health for her family member. And with that, we are scheduled to begin our meeting with a presentation from Riley Hamilton from our Lone Tree Youth Commission. We were having a bit of a technical challenge. I want to make sure that we can all hear Riley. So Riley, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me okay?
We can, and we would love to hear what's going on with the Youth Commission.
Fantastic. Well, hello, Mayor Millay and council members. It's an honor to be here speaking with you this afternoon. My name is Riley Hamilton, and I am a member of the Lone Tree Youth Commission. At our last meeting yesterday, we were honored to hear from Municipal Attorney Linda Michaud, who spoke to us about being a municipal attorney and the process for passing ordinances. She also walked us through the components of an ordinance, and we discussed this particularly in relation to the tobacco ordinance that we've been working on passing since the past year. We have continued to make progress on our project to help feed students who have been impacted by the pandemic, and we look forward to finishing up that project this year. Thank you so much.
Wonderful, Riley. Let me just touch base and make sure there aren't any questions from council this evening. Quickly run through, and we will start with Council Member Carpenter.
Hey, Riley, great to see you. Great job. Just wanted to let you know, I was on a call last night with the student advisory group of Douglas County School District, and they are planning a student leadership summit. It's going to be on March 8th. Don't worry, you don't need to write any of this down. Liana will get in touch with you all. But the good news is that we believe that you all will be presenting at that, or some of the representatives from the Lone Tree Youth Commission, because all of the other municipalities in our region, so Castle Rock, Parker, Highlands Ranch, they're so jealous of what it is that you all do. And Marcia Alston, who's the director of the Douglas County Youth Initiative, was just bragging on you. So I got up and gave a little discussion or a little description of exactly what it is that you all do and the rock stars that you all are. So keep that, they're trying to nail down that date. It's tentative right now, but they will be communicating that with you. And I look forward, I'll be on that as well, and look forward to watching you all be leaders in the entire region.
Thank you so much. That's very exciting.
Yeah, that's awesome, Jay. We're so proud of our Youth Commission and obviously love every opportunity to allow them to shine beyond the borders of Lone Tree. Wonderful. Councilmember Anderson.
I'm sorry, I just joined. I'm a little late. I'm not caught up where we are.
Oh, sorry, Mike. I thought they said you had hopped on right before we started. We just heard an update from our awesome Lone Tree Youth Commissioner Riley Hamilton. They had a wonderful presentation from our city attorney. I think I could listen to our city attorney speak all the time. I'm sure they enjoyed it as much as we do. She's super bright and talented. So, Mike, just any follow-up questions for our youth commissioner today?
No questions, but thank you, Riley, for what you're doing and for this opportunity that Jay just talked about. I think that's terrific. that we have youth that'll step up and do that type of thing, represent our city so well. We're very proud of you, Riley.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the support of you guys and just the opportunity to be a leader in the community.
Yeah, someday you're sitting up here, you're sitting virtually in one of these chairs. Hopefully you'll be there in person. Council Member Shaw.
Yes, hopefully you'll be there in person. Thank you, Riley, for the update. I don't have any questions, but we truly are proud of all of you and the work that you do and how well you represent the city of Lone Tree. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Wonderful. And so we have another distinguished guest. Riley, you heard from one smart woman yesterday with our city attorney. You're going to hear from another smart woman today, Representative Kim Ransom, who's going to give us a legislative update. So you may want to stick around and hear her wisdom as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it to Representative Ransom for a legislative update as she gets ready to start the full session on the 16th.
Thank you so much, Jackie. It's so great to see all of you. I consider all of you friends, and I hope that you all feel comfortable in contacting me anytime you have either issues about things going on in the legislature or input on bills or questions about bills. Those are the types of things I want to be very accessible to all of you on. And I should extend that. I see that there are other people on this call besides the folks on the city council. So I just want to make sure that that extends to really people in the district. I mean, I need to be here and be willing to answer questions and send links and make sure people understand what we're doing. So Jackie, as you mentioned, yes, we started session as was required by law on January 13th. The new members were sworn in. Those of us that had been reelected took our next oath of office, and we spent 3 days passing some bills that needed to happen quickly. There were just a few, I think there were about 7 that just for procedural things or things that needed to be continued. They weren't terribly controversial, really, although they weren't unanimous either. They weren't ones that you would expect hundreds of people to come testify on. So those 7 bills were processed and passed, and then then we recessed. What the majority party had decided is that with the vaccines hitting the state, and that combined with the fact that there had been the rise in COVID cases over November and December, maybe some full hospitals, maybe some, definitely increase in cases. And I mean, a lot of people were just much more comfortable sending us home for 5 weeks. Now, that being said, I'm sure you all know that your representative, i.e. that's me, didn't get to go home for 5 weeks because I'm serving on the Joint Budget Committee, which is actually a good thing for all of you. It really is. And the issue is that the Joint Budget Committee has still been meeting all along because we had to get the supplemental bills ready. They will be introduced on the 16th when we come back into session. And then we're also working on next year's budget. It's a several month-long process. We actually started back in November with the governor's proposed budget. We take that, we listen, and then we work it up. Remember, the legislature really is who votes on the budget, but the governor does give us a proposed budget on November 1st. So we've been working basically full time since right after the election, which is fine. I mean, that's what I signed up for with the Joint Budget Committee. So I've still been going down and having hearings and reading budget documents and things like that. So just real quick, when I mentioned supplementals, I don't know if you guys heard that piece, but the supplemental bills are actually introduced this year. It will be on February 16th. It's just a package of bills that true up last year's budget. So if that makes sense, things that have changed since we passed last year's budget, which was last June. It took the state year goes from July 1st to June 30th. So things have changed since then, i.e. student counts in schools, Medicaid caseload, other issues with employees. Clearly, we had some fires, some wildfires that were very expensive, and so there was some dollars that came from FEMA and from the federal coffers as well, of course, but we still needed to put some money into wildfire mitigation in preparation for next year. In any event, those are the types of things that the supplemental bills are. We're truing up last year's budget. So that's what we've been working mostly on the last few weeks. But again, we've also started figure setting for next year's budget. So if you have more specific questions, I'm always happy to send out budget documents. You can find a lot of information on the legislative website under the budget tab, but I'm happy to send specific links if you have specific questions about, if you want to hear what the Department of Agriculture did, for example, or whatever, I can send you those documents if that's something that you would be wanting to follow up on. I do have one bill that the county has asked me to run, and that actually has to do with Lone Tree, kind of. It stems from a very tragic murder that happened in Lone Tree, the father-son, that I'm sure you know about. And what the county has determined, along with the Department of Human Services, is that part of the issue was that there was not a valid definition of domestic violence, even in our statutes anywhere. They were going under, unsafe environment. They were kind of grouping together when judges were making these decisions and when child welfare workers were making these decisions. And so they needed a definition of domestic violence actually in statute, and then that would trigger rulemaking with the Department of Human Services, and specifically our Human Services, which is down in Castle Rock, which, as you know, well, you guys know this, but for the sake of other listeners, it overlays, the county overlays the entire county. So I'm sure they work with you as well, just the same way they work with me as well. And so I'm going to be on the prime sponsor for that bill. It is bipartisan, so we do expect it to pass, and we're working with CML and, the counties. We've had, lots of stakeholding going through that. But anyway, stay tuned on that. You'll be seeing that bill coming through. I don't know where it will be assigned. I'm presuming judiciary, but it potentially could be one of the health committees. But that's one of the bills I've been working on that you will see that kind of affects us, not in a happy way, but it's good that we can figure out something to do to take action going forward. So, excuse me. So with that, if anybody has questions, I'm happy to address them. Otherwise, that was all I had for you.
Okay, well, again, thank you so much for being here. I think is evidenced by the screen, by the pictures associated with the screen. One of the issues that's near and dear to the heart of Lone Tree is transportation and transportation funding. And I know, talking of Groundhog's Day, it's a conversation that we have repeatedly had in the local metro area, and I think throughout the state. And so I do think anything regarding transportation is something that is near and dear to our hearts, and we want to be engaged in. And I think Council historically, and our position has not changed, is that we do feel very strongly that more money needs to be spent funding transportation in the entire state of Colorado. But also we think it's important that the metro area that represents 57% of the state's population and contributes 60% of the state funding for transportation. We want to make sure that the transportation investments are happening in the metro area. We recognize there is great need throughout the entire state, and we're not diminishing anyone else's need, but I think with the population and the vehicle miles traveled, the road usage in the metro area being the lion's share of what is happening in the state, and even freight traffic. Even the lion's share of freight traffic is actually occurring in the metro area. It vastly exceeds any of the other transportation planning regions throughout the state. So you've got a bunch of folks working here to try and get that message across, and we'd appreciate any support and help that you could give us in recognizing the investments that need to occur on that. So that's my big plug. Always my civil engineering hat comes on, but I want to make sure if there's any other issues council members want to touch on, and start with Councilmember Shaw.
Thank you. And Kim, always thank you for your fine representation of our city and our county. I don't know what we would do without you. You're wonderful. I think that I would echo Mayor Millet's comments about transportation. It is so important to our region. I can't think of anything other than perhaps affordable housing that is a need for the Denver metro area and for the state of Colorado. So thanks for all you do.
And you know I'm honored, Wynn. It's great to hear from you. And just to let you know on the transportation piece, I have told people all along that is one. I have 4 priorities on the budget committee, and that's one of them. Transportation is one of them. And we should be having money again this year. If you remember when Senate Bill 267 passed, that was in 18, those COPs, certificates of participation, for anyone who isn't familiar with the term, COPs were part of that bill, and that money should be in place again. I mean, we have the ability to, the treasurer knows he has to sell those certificates. And last year it was delayed a bit, I believe, because of what was happening with the economy, last spring. And so I believe that should happen on schedule this year. Last I heard, it was on schedule to happen again. And you probably know there's a formula that's generally used. So it's not necessarily, Jackie, the way you said it with, 57%
right.
Staying in the metro area. That's not so much how that formula works, but 60% to highways, 22% to counties, and 18% to municipalities. And so that money should be coming straight to you again this year. At least that's what I would shoot for. And I know 2 years ago in 2019, we were able to get some money, just irregular funding, when we were finalizing the budget. It seems like my party, that's the minority party, was pushing really hard to get more transportation dollars in. And that year it was 300 million, and it was versus the 500 million of COPs that are out of 267. And we use the same formula. So again, to the best of our ability, I'm trying to get as much money as possible to the local level, because you guys are the ones that know how it needs to be spent, much more so than, at the Capitol or the bureaucracy downtown trying to figure out how to spread out that money. I think it should be done as locally as possible every time. So.
Thank you for that, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to clarify. The HUTF formula that is used to distribute the money is exactly what you said. My comments were more directed at, since 60% of the revenue is generated here in the metro area and 57% of the population is in the metro area, we need to see a larger share. That funding formula is decades old and really doesn't represent road usage today and population today. So that is one of the things that we would love to see, the Metro mayors would love to see, and there's support on council to look at, as we have new revenue sources, or the revenue sources that come in for transportation, is really looking at a more equitable way to fund throughout the entire state, recognizing the entire state has great need, but only 36% of the investment at the state level is coming back into the metro area through the existing funding formulas. So we'd really appreciate the metro area, and Lone Tree would very much appreciate the legislature looking at that and saying, is this may have worked in the 1950s as a distribution formula. Is this the best way? Or is this how roads and transportation is being used today? And should we update those formulas? So that's more where my comments were.
Thank you so much for clarifying. Now I've got that. You know who, if you happen to see someone from CML before I do, that would be a good thing to get across, because that, I think a lot of it comes from them. And seriously, if I see or speak with anyone, Ginny or whoever from CML, I will definitely ask that question.
Very much appreciate that. I want to make sure that Councilmember Anderson has an opportunity. Is there something, Councilmember Anderson, you would like to share with Representative Ransom?
Thank you very much, Kim, for what you're doing, particularly for being on the Joint Budget Committee. That's so important in terms of dealing with the priorities on the south side of town as we continue with growth opportunities. I wonder if you might take just a minute or two to talk to our public that may be listening in, to tell them a little about what you think the impacts of Gallagher are going to be on the total budget funding for next year.
God bless you, Mike. Wait a minute. That could take all meeting.
No. What's the elevator speech, Kim?
Yeah.
Well, the elevator speech is that Gallagher was passed. The Gallagher Amendment was passed many, many years ago, as you know. And there were some issues with special districts that I think will be largely resolved with the repeal. I'm not sure. I think you're going to see my cat there. See, when we're at home, there's the cat. Sorry, she had just jumped in my lap and was jumping up onto my desk. So I thought I'd show you.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I think that there are going to be, well, I won't sugarcoat it. When I went to a meeting with our assessor, she said taxes, your property taxes will go up. So I don't want to sugarcoat that piece of it. But what I will say is that without the repeal, there would have been, I think, some fixing that needed to be done going out to the voters, for example, because with the fact that taxes can't be raised, clearly we have the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, they were kind of pushing against each other. And so repealing Gallagher will help the special districts. I think the fire districts, the police districts, those types of things will, we won't have to have the balance between business and residential property taxes anymore. So if that kind of answers your question, I think you're going to have to stay tuned. I don't know exactly, I can't tell you amounts or exactly what it's going to look like, because the Gallagher Amendment has been in place for what, over 40 years. And so I think we're going to learn a lot over the next 6 months or a year as assessors, as the special districts, as just the counties that are sending out those property tax bills, as we start seeing what it looks like.
Well, thank you for offering that, Kim. It's important, I think, that we all as elected officials are rather transparent with the public in terms of people aren't sure what it meant to pass that repeal. And we need to be able to translate it to people in terms that they can understand.
Mm-hmm.
And then and thanks for keeping it brief, because that could have taken the whole study session. I want to make sure, Councilmember Carpenter, Jay, why don't you round us up this evening or this afternoon?
All right, perfect. Well, thanks again for being here, Kim. It's always great to see you, and thanks for your ongoing representation. I know you're always so accessible to us, and we certainly appreciate it. You're only about a mile away geographically, but I know you're always just a phone call away. And so, but I will echo the thoughts earlier in terms of transportation, but also infrastructure as we continue to grow as a state. I think that's going to be certainly an emphasis and a priority, and I thank you for placing a priority on that as well. So, so if you could just do a quick elevator speech on, you mentioned there's some bureaucracy going on downtown. So, no, just kidding.
Funny, Jay.
So thanks for everything, Danielle.
Oh, my pleasure. And truly, it's an honor to, to live right here and to be part of Douglas County and Lone Tree. And, the district also includes Parker. So I'm just proud as I could be to be part of this community, and then also to be able to take your wishes downtown. So again, please always, always let me know how any bill you see coming, how it would affect our community and how it would affect Lone Tree and Lone Tree businesses and Lone Tree residents and everything else, because I need to be able to make sure I have those facts in mind as I am downtown casting votes. So anything else?
I think that's so. We'll let you go. We know how hard you're working. The city budget was a challenge. 2020, it felt like the budget never ended. So God bless you for your good work on our state budget and continued work on that. So thank you so much for taking time out of your day and for your great advocacy for Lone Tree and Douglas County down at the Capitol. So thank you, Kim.
I'm so happy to do it. So anyway, thanks again for having me. I will talk to you guys later.
Okay, take good care.
You bet.
All right, moving on. Next on our agenda is discussion regarding a request to Douglas County for Lone Tree to be included in the open space shareback. And our city attorney, Linda Michow, is going to be leading this conversation. Linda.
Well, good afternoon, Mayor and City Council members. Nice to see you all again. We have partnered this time with the City of Castle Pines on proposing that the countywide open space tax on, well, it's actually a sales and use tax that was adopted by the voters in 1994 and countywide, of course, but we have partnered with the City of Castle Pines in proposing that the cities of Lone Tree and Castle Pines also be afforded the opportunity to allocate their proportionate share of open space sales and use tax revenues for projects within their own communities. And in reviewing the resolution, the enabling resolution that originally approved the countywide open space tax, you know, there really is no limitation on which municipalities are able to participate. And so we think and propose to the Board of County Commissioners that it would only be fair if the cities of Lone Tree and Castle Pines could also participate in that. It's my understanding that Castle Rock was most recently awarded approximately $4 million of shareback funding from that revenue source, you know, which is quite a bit of money and certainly could benefit the communities of Lone Tree and Castle Pines. So I have proposed the draft letter that I believe all of you have a copy of. Seth and Michael Penny in Castle Pines sort of pushed me to write the letter, and I finally got it out the door, and I'm happy to answer any questions, and I'm sure Seth has actual dollar amounts if he wanted to share that with you about, you know, what we could hope to obtain through that open space tax.
Linda, before we turn over to council, I just want to ask a clarifying question. These are tax dollars that are collected by folks that shop and dine in the city of Lone Tree, correct? And it's correct. Sharing back of, so it's not taking money away from any of the other municipal partners. It's a portion of money that is being collected for open space in the city of Lone Tree.
It's big, yes.
Right. So what we're asking for is to be treated just like any other municipality like Larkspur and Castle Rock and
Parker. Absolutely.
And they get a share back from the county of all of the receipts that are for the open space tax, right? So all the money that's spent in Castle Rock stays in Castle Rock potentially.
It's based on a formula.
Yeah.
So could you clarify that? Somebody made a comment to me that we might be taking money away from another municipality, and I just want to understand that.
Sure. So it's based on, it's a really weird formula, and I would hope that when or if it gets reauthorized, which, you know, I hope we would all support and hope we would be included in. I think the way you, Mayor, put it would be the way we would want it to go, where, you know, a portion or maybe all of what gets generated in each community stays in that community, and then the county keeps what is generated in the rest of the county. But the way it's done now is based on a formula based on new vehicle registration. So it's really more like a population-based formula, unfortunately for us. So for a town like Castle Rock, which has, you know, a larger population, the reason they were able to get $4 million was A, because they have more vehicle registrations than we will, and B, because it's actually done by request. It's not an automatic dispersal. You actually the town
Okay.
or the city has to request the funds, and the county, probably the open space board, and then the county commissioners have to approve the project or have to sign off on the project that you're using it for. So not as clean as a lot of the other sharebacks that we are accustomed to, but and so what we think that the math that we've done is in the neighborhood of $100,000 a year. But we've been in business for 25 years. That's $2.5 million that we've forgone over that time. So it'll add up, and certainly adding that amount to our budget, our limited park and rec budget every year will help. And again, I think this gets us kind of a foothold into, or would get us a foothold into, hopefully being formally included if the measure is reauthorized by voters in the next few years.
Right. Thanks for clarifying that for me.
Sure.
I want to open it up to see if there's any questions, and we'll start with Councilmember Carpenter this time.
Yeah, no questions, but if we can find money that we are deserving of, I'm all for it, obviously. So thanks. To me, it's well worth it.
Councilmember Shaw?
Yes, this actually surprised me a little bit. I worked with one of our counterparts at the city of Castle Pines, and so this truly was a surprise, and I would very much like to become part of the beneficiary of this funding. We certainly do deserve to be considered for it. Thank you.
Thanks. Councilmember Anderson?
You're muted, Mike.
I was trying not to have the chimes in the background get in my way. No, this is an important issue, and I think we're on the right track. And Seth, appreciate your efforts to, and Linda's efforts to move it forward. Regarding the existing formula, I hope we look around at what other people are doing in terms of formulas and make sure that we put forward our interest in terms of what we'd like to see happen. My recollection is that in Arapahoe County, there's a formula that distributes some of the money from open space tax out on population directly to the cities for them to allocate as they prioritize. And then other money is available through grants, which creates the opportunity on a countywide basis for projects that may overlap cities to get together and partner up on requesting some of those funds. Just as long as we're taking advantage, Seth, of what other people are doing and put forward the best approach with the county in terms of what will meet our best interest as well.
Great. So I completely agree with my council members that I think this it makes good sense and is appropriate to send the request on to Douglas County for consideration. So,
Mayor, I misspoke. It's about $250,000 a year, not $100,000 a year. I had those reversed. So that's obviously more money. And as far as the statement that it would take away, you asked a question about whether it would take away from other communities. I think our expectation would be that it wouldn't. It would be, based on the same formula. It just wouldn't mean that the county would keep as much. So okay. It shouldn't impact negatively Castle Rock, Parker, or Larkspur. Okay,
that's great to clarify as well. Yeah. And again, I think I think as Linda stated, we really do want to be involved in the decision making and kind of guiding the decision. Government is best at the local level, and we are very aware of the needs in the Lone Tree area for access to open space, and it's an important thing that draws people and has been the reason people have decided to live in this community, is to be able to get good access to trails and open space. And as we look to the east side, I think we're going to even have more demands on our budget to provide that. So thank you, and we're looking forward to having a great dialogue with the county about the best way to move forward. So, all right, moving on. Ordinance 21-01, an ordinance amending Chapter 4 of the City of Lone Tree Municipal Code to add a new section 4-3-140 and a new Article 6 concerning construction use tax credits and fee waivers for qualifying attainable housing projects. And our Deputy City Manager, Kristen Baumgartner, is going to lead this conversation for us. And again, this is something we have already study sessioned a number of times, but I think, and I really appreciate staff continuing to take our feedback back into this. I want to note this is on the agenda for the consideration on first reading by council, but any feedback that you still have, we want to make sure is included in that. So, Kristen.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Next slide, please. So as we've talked about previously, just quickly, that attainable housing is not something new as far as a policy, a guiding policy from City Council for the city. It's mentioned in many of the overarching documents of the city, including the comprehensive plan, our East Side sub-area plans, requirements on our annexation agreement for the East Side, as well as a Ridgegate attainable housing plan that was adopted in July of 2018. Next slide, please. In that document, it states that the goal for the City of Lone Tree and Ridgegate is to make sure that they are supporting varying housing opportunities for every age, variety of income levels, and providing an opportunity for people to live close to their jobs in Lone Tree. Next slide, please. But one thing that is missing is that none of these documents require the city or have any discussion about the city providing any type of direct waivers or incentives to further motivate this type of development within the city. And so we were tasked with looking at ways we could incorporate that into the code. So staff is recommending adding a new section to Chapter 4 to provide an option for tax credits and fee waivers for projects that meet certain attainable housing criteria. And just again, as a reminder, we've talked about this a lot on the east side, but this code change would apply citywide. Next slide, please. So as a history of where we've been with this, we have talked to council in 2 study sessions on January 5th and January 19th, and really appreciated all the great feedback that we have heard from you. We also had opportunities to have more discussions with the Douglas County Housing Partnership and also CHAFA. And what we heard on January 19th for kind of a second follow-up from council was that you supported the rental property component as presented by staff, but asked us to research some additional questions you had on the owner-occupied products. And so since that meeting, we kind of shifted and focused on getting some feedback directly from our development partners, as well as researched what some other communities are doing. The new draft ordinance that is in the packet for consideration provides additional flexibility on owner-occupied projects to be negotiated on a case-by-case basis. Staff felt that that was the best approach, and I'll go into a little more detail as to why we are recommending that. Next slide, please. So just technical changes quickly that we'll go through. Again, we're proposing a new section be added to Chapter 4, Section 4-3-140, titled Construction Use Tax Credit. And this would be specific only to construction use taxes. It would be a consideration up to 100% tax credit. We did separate the ordinance to include different criteria for owner-occupied dwelling units versus rental dwelling units, and these would always require City Council approval. Next slide, please. In addition, we're proposing a new section be added to Chapter 4 as well, Section 4-6-10, about adoption of fees for service. So the prior section addresses construction use tax. This section would address fees, and it really is just adding in language about current processes under our code. The council has the ability to set fees to recoup costs incurred. Then in addition to that, Section 4-6-20 would further give direction on waiver or reduction in fees, again, allowing that to happen up to 100% following the same criteria that is in the prior section on construction use tax. And again, fee waivers of this nature for attainable housing would require council approval. Next slide, please. So getting into the details, the rental criteria we're going to just discuss very briefly. We did not make any changes from the last meeting, which stated that there would need to be a minimum of 20% of the units in a rental project must provide housing for persons or households with incomes at or below a weighted average of 60% of the area median income. It must be kept attainable for a minimum of 40 years. And we did incorporate a tiered approach based on direct proportion to the percentage of attainable for rent dwelling units. And so what that would mean is if a project comes in with 25% of the total dwelling units qualifying as attainable per the criteria above, the city may credit a 25% tax credit. And so we felt that for rental units, it's a pretty straightforward kind of one-for-one benefit. But this also does hopefully motivate possibly some mixed income products as well. And we didn't want to leave them out of the opportunity to have some benefit if a developer wanted to propose a product that had both attainable housing as well as market rate housing. Next slide, please. So on the owner occupied criteria, as I mentioned, based on the feedback that we heard, we had previously added in a provision to specifically say in the ordinance that the city does want to incentivize development of attainable for sale products to provide more housing product options for home buyers. We ended up changing the ordinance to remove specific minimum criteria, and we are proposing a general provision in the code to negotiate both affordability criteria as well as tax credits and fee waivers on any owner-occupied projects on a case-by-case basis through an agreement between the applicant and the city. And we are requesting this approach just due to the feedback that we did receive both from the development community as well as from the Douglas County Housing Partnership and CHAFA that these are very complex deals that happen. And to try to have kind of stricter criteria might be a disincentivize people from coming forward with things, and that this really does give some onus on the development community to come forward with some creativity and know that the city is willing to work and support projects such as this. So on the next slide, I do want to go through some of the stuff we did hear from the development community and then open it up for questions that council might have. So when we reached out, we talked last time, the financing is more complicated for owner-occupied since low income tax credits are not available for owner-occupied, only for rental properties. And a lot of the development community did say that those really do make a difference in how they can finance attainable housing are the low income tax credits, which are very competitive. They said that, construction costs are somewhat set and that things that they have to look at then if they want to make projects more attainable on a for sale basis are increasing density. They will lower the cost of the design or the construction materials used to make it pencil out. They do look for fee reliefs to the developer themselves. And so things like water tap fees are a barrier for them. They said that's usually one of the highest kind of single costs that they face as developers, which obviously as a city, we don't have that ability, but that was some of the feedback we did receive is that water tap fees are challenging. And we did see in some other communities that some municipalities do subsidize, they have fees or different things that they collect that they then can help reimburse some of the water tap fees that are paid. And then they said that the other challenging thing is that when some of these other methods are used, if they're in market rate communities, some of the costs are sometimes absorbed by the market rate buyers. And so to offset what they've decreased, they will increase costs of the surrounding buyers to make the project work. And so they said that is constantly a struggle as a developer on trying to figure out how to make that work. We also found that deed restrictions are very common, but terms need to be evaluated carefully as they can become a disincentive to potential buyers. And I think this did come up with the Douglas County Housing Partnership at the last study session that, really when people are looking to get into a home, they're looking at that like anyone as an investment and hoping that they can then leave that home and move upward as far as their purchasing ability. And with deed restrictions and limiting how much properties can increase value, it somewhat defeats that purpose of putting the person who got into that house initially in a better place when they come out. It keeps it affordable, but it sometimes disincentivizes buyers to want to go that route. Next slide, please. Things that we did hear, though, that are helpful to developers that I think we can continue to look at, and we currently do some of these things, is they did say that waiving and reducing fees to the developer is helpful. And so even knowing that that's a possibility would be something that developers do like to see, that they have that option to discuss with municipalities. Obviously, the more the better, but they do appreciate any impacts that we can help with reducing developer fees. They did say that they're very excited about ADUs and those opportunities going forward, and they feel that ADUs don't sacrifice quality as much as possibly some of the alternatives that are looked at for attainable housing construction. They did say that expedited development review processes is something that's really key, that if their projects can go to market first, it really does help. And so anything we could do to help from that standpoint. They said reduced parking requirements as well as reduced park dedication requirements, again, help save on costs of the overall project. And so those are additional things that they said are kind of non-financial to the government that could possibly help incent them to want to invest in projects such as these. Next slide, please. And then the last part is that as we've done more research, if a proposal came forward, the city would need to partner with the Douglas County Housing Partnership for their expertise and management of an owner-occupied project. We don't have all the answers as far as how this would be structured, how it would be administered, but we would have to rely heavily on the Douglas County Housing Partnership to assist us on a case-by-case basis if projects such as these came forward to the city. But we did hear overall, because this was discussed at the last meeting, that developers did support the city, including in our code, something to show support of attainable projects of this nature and to allow flexibility for developers to propose projects over time. And so we, kind of asked the question very straightforward, is this even worth doing if it's not going to alone make a dent with the fee waiver, the construction use tax credit? And they still felt that it was important for the city to have it in our code for that opportunity, and then to continue to look at some of those other aspects as we move forward and see what else we could do if we want to continue to focus as an importance for the city. So that's kind of the research we did. Kelly and Linda have been highly involved in this and have very much appreciated their support as we've researched this and their teams. And so if you have any additional questions, we're happy to answer those. There's one final slide, if you can go to that, please. Just that, as Mayor Millay mentioned, this is included in the regular meeting for consideration on first reading. However, it's totally at the council's discretion, and if there's further work to be done, we could continue this to the next meeting if more discussion is needed.
Great, thanks, Kristen. And I think that was a great presentation, kind of summarizing the conversation to date. And I appreciate the input that you received from the development community on how what makes the most sense. So to start with comments or questions, we're going to turn it over to our council expert on all things attainable housing, Councilmember Shaw. I know you have been digging in the weeds, so please give us your thoughts and comments regarding the most recent proposal.
Certainly, thank you. I feel like this really is a good way to handle it. I have to think that this is an area where the creativity and encouraging that creativity of developers to come to us is good. There may be opportunities that present themselves to those developers in the future that, coupled with our efforts, could really bring the right numbers to the table and let something wonderful like this happen. So I'm happy with staff's presentation, and I would be happy to go forward.
Yeah, it kind of signals that the door is open on the owner-occupied dwelling units, and we'd like to have a conversation, right? Great. Okay, Councilmember Anderson.
I totally agree. Appreciate staff's work in terms of listening to the developers. I think the only way to really move forward on this is with creativity and innovation, by at least opening the door. We're receptive if something good comes along, but it doesn't sound like the product is highly desirable at this point in time in terms of some of the administrative problems and financial problems in terms of making it happen. But great, I think it's a great proposal, and the not being prescriptive is a better way, I think, to go forward, and we'll see what happens.
Thanks, Mike. Councilmember Carpenter.
Yeah, I acknowledge that a lot of work went into this. So I'm in full support of it as presented. It addressed all of my concerns up front initially. So thanks.
Thanks. Okay, well, it looks like it is, as I said, and was reiterated by Kristen. It's on our agenda for action consideration a little later tonight. So I think that's right where it needs to be. So great. All right, moving on. Another item that is also on our consideration on our agenda later this evening is an ordinance amending Chapter 4. Chapter 4 is getting a lot of action tonight of the Lone Tree Municipal Code by adding a new Article 7 concerning a tax incentive program for businesses in the entertainment district plan development. And again, this is something that we have talked about numerous study sessions before, and I'm really excited with the creativity staff has come up with, and our Deputy City Manager, Kristen Baumgartner, is going to lead us through this one too. Kristen.
Thanks, Mayor and Council. I'm excited to have the opportunity on both of these this evening, and I am going to let our Economic Development Director, Jeff Holwell, tag team this a little bit with me. But if we can go to the next slide, please, I'm going to kind of give the background on this. So as a reminder, staff did come to council towards the end of last year with some proposed ordinance to create a tax shareback program that would incentivize appropriate reuse or redevelopment projects in the Lone Tree Entertainment District. And we received really good feedback that was super helpful in then drafting an ordinance that we are excited to go through with you this evening. Next slide, please. So what we're hoping this ordinance will do is it's really developed to be used to encourage development for an area for people to shop, eat, and pursue leisure and recreational activities, and includes incentivizing uses such as restaurants, retail shopping, entertainment venues, and other similar uses in a part of the city that has seen significant turnover and vacancies over the last several years. We would propose that current zoning and city design standards would still apply pursuant to this ordinance, and that the properties must be within the Westbrook Entertainment and Sports District PD, which on the next slide, we will show a picture of what that plan development from 1998 looked like. And on the next slide, a more readable map that really shows the boundaries on Yosemite Street up to C470, and then kind of wraps behind the city office buildings and the couple developments behind us. I am going to, at this point, turn it over quickly to our Economic Development Director, Jeff Holwell. He's just going to give kind of an update on kind of what's going on in this area as far as properties and vacancies before we dig into the ordinance details themselves. So Jeff, if you don't mind taking over, and thank you again for your help on this one.
Hi, Mayor and Council, and absolutely, Kristen, we'll give you a quick break and use this moment to give you just some updates on what's happening in the district, and as you drive by it every day and probably see something new there, and why we think this type of approach will be very useful towards encouraging reinvestment and the kinds of reinvestment we want in the district. Next slide, please. What you might appreciate is that the original plan and the PD and the developers that started the district actually were quite successful at attracting the kind of uses that they envisioned from entertainment kind of uses. If you can think about theaters and indoor skydiving and bowling alleys and lots of restaurants and names that we've forgotten, but hops and Black Angus and Bennett's barbecue and all that stuff. Of course, Bahama Breeze, I failed to mention it. The original intent, I think, served a great purpose. What was missing, and we've talked about this many times, the infrastructure behind it didn't continue to support it and add that district that we were hoping to achieve. And a lot of the things you've done, but from things like the Lone Tree Vision Book to the creation of the Lone Tree Bid, have played a role in the infrastructure that we're looking at fixing. And we continue to hope to fix, but we also need to make sure that we try to attract and retain the tenant mix that is there today. So next slide, please. Or that has been there historically. And then I'm going to go through a few different property types to give you examples of things that are happening today. And you see this every day, but you may not know the final details. We have several properties in transition. They were originally built or homes of, in these cases, restaurant facilities, and are now not vacant. To be quite honest, the one on the left, Los Arcos, just sold for $2.75 million. And is transitioning to become a medical clinic, an eye clinic, and it'll be owner occupied and something that, of course, is important in our community as well, but changing use. The Sweet Tomatoes property closed during the COVID-19, the beginning of COVID-19, and it is under contract by a developer who'd like to see it as an office type of use. Miama next to it was sold about 2 years ago, and it has not been in operation, but the buyer was a medical office user, and they haven't done anything with it yet, but it still remains in that transitionary period. It's not on the market. It's not sitting there because there's no demand for it. It's because the owner's not doing anything. And then the last one, started out as Pasta J's, switched to Washoku, has been purchased through an SBA loan by a group that's going to start a nail salon and a Vietnamese restaurant. So it was still in the $2 million range that they bought that building for, and they'll keep the tenants they have there as well. Next slide, please. And then we have properties that are currently for lease or sale. Some are directly related to the COVID-19 pandemic. On the left, Mimi's Cafe just closed about a week and a half ago permanently. The ownership of that building, Mimi's doesn't own that building. They were a tenant of it. They had not been paying rent for several months, as we understand it, since March, and the ownership finally agreed that it was time to look for something better or a paying tenant of their building. So that is now officially gone. Similar with Fox and Hound, the ownership group of that building is separate of Fox and Hound. They have officially closed, and they removed a lot of the items from that building, and are looking for a new tenant. They will not sell. They are retail owners or restaurant owners, so they want a new tenant. Ikiban Buffet is hanging on there. They are owner occupiers of that building. That has had been so many things, as you know. In this case, they would be interested in selling or leasing, but in the meantime, they are doing a little bit of takeout work, and it may change, but that's another related item. And then the final one that's just something to be thinking about. The Element Hotel, we've heard from multiple sources, is seeking buyers. Also the ownership group is not the Element Hotel. They're a small owner, and they're not receiving the kind of mortgage payments they need to stay alive. So they're hoping to sell it. We don't know if it'll be another hotel group, but we're getting inquiries about multifamily conversion. We know that multifamily is not allowed in that area, but just the sign that there's not enough traffic in 2020 and 2021 to support their mortgage payments is concerning. So next slide, please. And then long-term vacancies. We've talked about these a lot, but of course these properties are vacant, but for other reasons beyond the market. Some may be too high in price, or the building type, and other things that you know all about, and we think this can address it too. And then finally, next slide, please. I would, it's worth mentioning that we have two very COVID-challenged businesses in the United Artists Theaters and Bolero. As far as Bolero continues to have some operations. United Artists, as you know, is closed, and there is no finite date of when Hollywood will release movies allow them to open. Our hope is that they do, but we have to be thinking about what might be happening if they transition in that business. So I'll go to the last slide and then have Kristen jump back in. But all in all, that's a significant chunk of property that's in a form of transition, 275,000 square feet, and that's what we are mentioning that are officially done. We do know that there is even good transition. The Pho by Night is now going to be a Cajun restaurant. There's a lot of this stuff happening, but the original intent of the district to be entertainment use, we are hoping that this kind of incentive program can be successful, and I think I'm confident that it can be successful in retaining that kind of use in this district as it was originally intended to be. So Kristen will get into the details, but I'm happy to jump into for the rest of the conversation. Next slide, and back to Kristen.
Thanks, Jeff, so much. And I think after seeing all those pictures and when we put the total square footage together, I think it was pretty shocking to us as well. Why we really feel that doing something as far as a code change would really help hopefully enhance this area. So the proposed ordinance that was included in the packet would add another chapter or another article to Chapter 4, Article 7, and we're referring to it as the Enhanced Tax Incentive Program, or the ETIP program. This would encourage redevelopment and/or substantial expansion of businesses in the entertainment district for a limited period of time. We have in the ordinance 7 years. We thought that was a good time period to not have it be in perpetuity, but to give it some time to have some traction and make some impacts. The purpose of this change is also to provide employment opportunities, to preserve and enhance a tenant mix in that area, to stimulate economic and social vibrancy, and to also retain and increase tax collections that contribute to providing municipal services. So though we are appreciative of any investment in our community, as Jeff mentioned, we are seeing some change where when businesses turn over, it can have impacts on our tax collections just by our the mere fact of our kind of revenue structure. Service type businesses really don't generate ongoing tax revenue for the city. Next slide, please. I did want to take the minute to go through a couple definitions that are new things, and these are important to understand as we kind of go through how the ordinance will be structured. The first one is enhanced tax, which is defined as the amount of admissions and or sales tax over the established base amount. And really, admissions and sales tax are the two things we're mainly focused on in this area, which as the entertainment district, those two are usually the most generated tax types in the area. The established base amount is defined as sales and or admissions tax collected by the city from the property or business over the previous 60 months. And so this would be calculated by the finance director when an application came forward. And we did take some feedback from council at the last study session that for newly established businesses or undeveloped property, because there are some pad sites in different areas in this area, those would look at a similar business to establish a base. So those would not have a zero base, but we would create a base amount based on a similar business in the city. Next slide, please. A couple more definitions. A project to qualify for this would be an establishment of a new business or substantial expansion of an existing business generating sales or admissions tax revenues. So only for businesses that would be generating those types of revenues would qualify. So businesses like Jeff mentioned that are coming in that aren't sales or admissions tax generating businesses, even if they are making some changes, they would not qualify for this program. Also, we defined an ETIP agreement, which would be a requirement between the applicant and the city per each project that would outline details, including the base amount, share back period, etc. Next slide, please. And then finally, we defined enhanced improvements, which would be improvements over and above that which would be otherwise required through the city's development process, including but not limited to streetscape, plazas, parks, public art, fountains, identification signs, traffic-related improvements, or mobility connectivity. And we'll get into later on in the ordinance what additional incentive might be available for businesses looking to add enhanced improvements. Next slide, please. So in order to participate, the criteria that would have to be met would be that they would submit an application through the city clerk's office, they would be required to likely generate enhanced taxes of at least $7,500 in the first year of operation. And this was a change that we made after, again, some feedback from council, where initially we had proposed that a business must be vacant for a year in order to participate. And after thinking through that a little more, we didn't want to limit any businesses or have that incent businesses to stay vacant for a period of time. And so instead, we thought tying it to some dollar amount, just to from an administrative standpoint, if there wasn't likely to be a base amount that was worth an incentive, we don't want to kind of target those businesses. But if there would be enhanced taxes of at least $7,500, which is approximately $500,000 in gross sales, that's how we came up with that dollar amount, they would be able to apply for this incentive program. The property has to be vacant, or it's in a planned transition of tenants and/or no business is operational. It must meet the city's zoning, plan development district, and design standard and guidelines. And lastly, it does have to have public-related benefits, which are defined in the ordinance as having job creation, tax generation, redevelopment, etc. Next slide, please. As far as the incentive structure itself, there's kind of 3 different options. First and foremost, again, a project only qualifies if it is going to generate admissions and sales taxes. So on the base incentive structure, for admissions and sales tax, it would be a tiered approach for no more than 5 years, and below are the maximum percentage amounts we're recommending. So the final determinations on this would be on a project-by-project basis, described in that ETIP agreement, but it would be no more than 5 years, and the below percentages would be the maximums each year. But those could be lowered or could be shorter than 5 years if that was negotiated through that ETIP agreement. In addition to that, if a project is coming forward with providing enhanced improvements, as we just previously defined, on a limited basis, we would consider up to 100% share back as a one-time share back on construction use tax towards those enhanced improvements. So that would further incent businesses that want to add some public amenities to have some assistance doing that. And then lastly, we didn't want to leave lodging tax completely out of the discussion. And so we did have in there that on a limited basis, per an ETIP agreement, lodging tax could be considered. And I think this would be in unique situations, but because there are several hotels in the entertainment district, if there is any turnover or changes, we don't want to totally rule that out as an option. Next slide, please. And so that was kind of an outline of the ordinance. But again, as Mayor Millay mentioned, this also is included in our regular meeting. We're happy to get more feedback if there's more discussion needed. But at this time, I'll turn it over to any questions that council has.
Kristen, could you flip back to the prior slide, the 2 slides ago, the one that kind of has the one right before this? This I think might be where council might want to ask some questions. So I just think it's good to have it up in front of everybody. And I want to say thank you to staff for this great work. I think council has acknowledged, even prior council acknowledged with the 2013 vision book, that this was an area, this was an opportunity zone within our community, and what could we do to enhance the opportunity? And I think the city's investments in transportation and in the corner park there were our attempts to be a good partner with our private sector and just to make it a desirable location. But we recognized we need to do a little bit more. And I think you guys have come up with some great ideas on how we might be able to do a little bit more. So Jay, why don't we start, Councilmember Carpenter, why don't we start with you on any thoughts or questions?
Yeah, man, it just makes my stomach churn when you look at that. What's happened to the entertainment district in just a mere year. So I do acknowledge that we obviously need to provide some incentive to revitalize that whole area. I do like the part about not having it have to be sit vacant for a full year. That way we can get some kind of quicker turnaround potentially. But one question, Kristen, I don't know whether this is for Kristen or for Jeff, but how are we gonna, in essence, market this? I know, is it just something that's buried in Chapter 4? Or would a potential developer or interested party would they be, I just want to make sure that this incentive, they're aware of this incentive potentially if they're shopping around.
I'll let Jeff answer that one.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Carpenter. That's a great question, and the most direct way to do it will be through contact to business, to building owners, or maybe even more typically the brokers that they hire to find it. So I communicate as recently as the last week with the people who are going to represent Mimi's and Fox and Hound, just about who they're looking for as tenants, and I think they, as people looking for tenants, will be very happy to know that this program exists as they're shopping around for tenants. I think that's the most direct way, or in the case of just a vacant property, the property owner themselves, and as they consider how to redevelop it. But I think also there are ways to just publicize this more widely too. There are, you've probably seen the Greenwood Village model that was publicized a year ago in throughout the Denver media, and I think that got a lot of traction. So I think we can do it in a more broad social way too, but directly to owners and their brokers is probably the most direct route we're going to find. And yes, we'll definitely be doing that.
Great, that makes total sense. Yeah, I just want to make sure that some of these potential suitors are aware of the opportunity. So great, thanks.
Absolutely, thank you.
And I think part of our COVID response and kind of welcoming back and encouraging investment in the city, and I think it ties in really nicely with that as well. Jay, how are you comfortable? I just want to make sure you're comfortable with the construction, but with the potential for the construction use share back. And I guess, are those parts of it that would be negotiated separately? Could Kristen or Jeff comment on consideration of a construction use share back or the lodging tax share back? Would those be negotiated separately?
Those would be negotiated as part of kind of that agreement formation, and we're recommending that the construction use share back is somewhat a reimbursement of those direct costs of those improvements. Versus the lodging tax share back we kept is pretty flexible, that we would just open up that discussion and look at that on a case-by-case basis in limited circumstances.
Great. And so again, kind of following the model we just talked about, not being prescriptive, but letting everyone know we're open to it. So I just want to make sure, Council, those to me are the biggest changes from what we've seen before in study sessions. So Jay, you're good with those? I
am. I like the flexibility piece for sure.
Great. Great. Councilmember Anderson, any comments or thoughts for staff on this, or for council members?
Well, I've been in the entertainment district here recently and had lunch a couple times at Rio Grande, and I know a lot of it's COVID related, but to look out at the parking lot and see how empty it is a little stressing, and being aware of the 2013 vision, things that we can do to try to help the proprietors and the owner and the developers move forward, I think is totally in line. So I'm very supportive. I did have one question related to implementation more. And I'm thinking about things in the vision like plazas and parks and fountains. Is this program set up for an individual facility and owner, or can people come together as a team if they want to try to move amenities like that?
Jeff, do you mind taking a stab at that one? I haven't really given a lot of thought to it, but I know you have thought about kind of the type of developments that might happen over there more. Yeah,
Councilmember Anderson, I think it's written so that it could be done, and that they may use this, or ideally we even look at other partners like the Lone Tree bid, or other ways to provide that type of assistance too. And you'll probably be hearing a little bit more of that even later this year, because this may not address it entirely. Where it would kind of fall short is that for example, today on one hand the Fox and Hound building, they're only looking for tenants, whereas the Mellow Mushroom Ikemon building wants to sell, and just their different agendas might make it really hard for those to pair up completely. But I think there are lots of ways for ownership, and so it's open to do it. And I like that suggestion, because the dollar would go a lot longer if we could. So we'll keep that open for sure.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Councilmember Shaw.
Thanks. Yes, I appreciate staff's thoughtfulness on trying to attract the right types of businesses that will benefit the city in the longer run, and to promote the spirit of this particular area and what we intended it to be. And at first blush, some of these numbers look very aggressive, but truly it is a situation where the area needs our help and support. And I think the flexibility afforded in the agreements is right as well. So I don't have any objection to have this go forward. I think sooner is good.
Yeah, I agree, Wynn. I think it'd be wonderful to be able to kind of announce this again. It's part of our welcoming back resilience, responding to COVID, and encouraging investment in an opportunity zone in our city. So, yeah. And I really do also like Councilmember Anderson's comments regarding, in particular, it kind of made me think about the bid, Jeff, and how the bid might be able to take advantage of this for, and I'm thinking more the construction use tax share back on any kind of a public improvement. And I don't think the way, and you know, the way I read this, it would allow that. Would allow the bid to maybe potentially come in as the bid to do a construction use tax share back. Could you clarify for me that is true or no?
We will ensure it, but that it would stand to reason. Yeah, yes, you know, because if they were to, for example, the bid raises money itself through its own property tax. If they spent some of that on a project, they would have a use tax liability, and that could be part of helping them do that. It would stand to reason, unless, you know, Linda wants to contradict me. I think it would. They're holding out a little bit right now just because they don't want to start a project if things keep changing. But I think in the next couple of months, we need to have another bid conversation too. Another board member's leaving, and we'll need to appoint some board members. So I think we'll have the opportunity to shape the bid a little bit more than we have in the last couple of years in a further conversation. So to answer your question, sorry.
No, that's fine. I think between first reading this evening and second reading in a couple of weeks, we'd love to make sure that issue is addressed. I think I'm very comfortable moving forward with the way it is now, but would like staff to take the time to confirm that by second reading, that it is that the bid would be allowed to participate in a construction use tax shareback program for a public amenity and public improvement to not just one building, but the whole area. So with that, I think it's all looking really good. So unless the council member has any other comments, I'm going to move forward on the agenda. So speak now or wait till later. Moving on, next is another very important project for the city, and excited to again thank partners for making this project possible next year. And it's the IGAs with Heritage Hills, Omni Park, and Park Meadows Metropolitan District for the Lincoln Avenue Overlay Project. And in fact, one of the IGAs is on our agenda for consideration later this evening. But we're going to have Justin Smits, our Public Works and Mobility Director, kick this off. Justin, too many J's.
No worries. Well, good evening, Mayor and members of City Council. Yeah, we're excited to bring this to study session tonight. As the mayor mentioned, we do have one of these IGAs on the regular session tonight, and I'll update on the status of the other ones as we go through this presentation. Next slide. So I want to provide a quick background just so we can all remember really kind of where this came from. So the City of Lone Tree Public Works Department did bid out the 2020 asphalt overlay and concrete replacement program to improve Lincoln Avenue. This was bid out late in 2019, and we awarded it in early 2020, obviously before a lot of things started to change in March of 2020. And due really to the unknown impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic to the financial position of the city, we made the tough decision to cancel those contracts obviously to ensure that we would have the financial stability, and we require those critical roadway repairs to be delayed at least a year. Next slide. Now, based on the high importance of this project and the positive impact that these improvements will have on all the adjacent communities and taxpayers along Lincoln Avenue, the city conducted several meetings with the adjacent metro districts to discuss the benefits of the project and also funding options for this project to move forward in 2021. As part of those discussions, all the metro districts adjacent to this section of Lincoln Avenue were very supportive of the project and further agreed to partner with a financial contribution. Our city manager led most of those conversations throughout that, and certainly were well received in conversations. Next slide. I did want to provide a brief again. This is the type of information that the city was presenting in our conversations, and this is probably familiar to most of you as this was the results from our 2020 asset data collection process. And what you can see here is, again, all the green streets are good, all right, and the more red or pink they get, much worse condition the roadways are in. In the city of Lone Tree, by far the street that stood out as the most in need of repair from a road maintenance perspective and has the most traffic is Lincoln Avenue. So obviously those two things coming together provided the critical nature for this project to move forward. One thing we showed, and I think this was helpful, was to kind of let everyone understand what roadway maintenance looks like. I know we briefed council on this, but we were able to brief the metro districts as well. And there's kind of that big cliff that comes when you get into that poor category. So roadways hold up for a long time pretty well, but as they approach the end of the fair, into the poor, the cliff into very poor and serious is very steep. And that is what we want to avoid and why this project is so critical to get out. Next slide. Again, a simple chart showing the boundaries, but this is a large section of roadway that is proposed that will be road-a-mill and overlaid. And what you can see is it goes all the way really from the western city border all the way to the I-25 interchange. And all the lanes that would be included throughout this entire section. All right, so again, that's kind of the background and history. The next slide show really what these very generous contributions that have been provided to the city. So in summary here, you can see all of the contributions to the 2021 asphalt overlay project on Lincoln Avenue. So what I want to do is highlight a few things. You can see right here, the Park Meadows Metro District in our discussions has agreed to a contribution amount of $500,000. That IGA approval is currently in process. We're going back and forth on some of the final details right now, and we anticipate having that ready for the next council meeting for consideration. The next one, the Omni Park Metro District, they have agreed to a contribution amount of $25,000. That is complete and is on the agenda for our regular session tonight. Heritage Hills Metro District has also agreed to the same $25,000 contribution. That one is in process as well. They actually have the same attorneys with Park Meadows Metro District. So we're working through, again, the final details on that. Anticipate having it prepared and ready for consideration at the next council meeting. And finally, there is also the annual service plan requirements for the Rampart Range Metro District. So there's one mill that is contributed to the city to support regional improvements. This year, in 2021, you can see the number $235,561 would be contributed and directed towards this project. There is not an IGA required. That is something that the district and the city already have in process, so there's no IGA required for that. So again, what we really wanted to brief was that all of these IGAs are coming or in process. And when you can see at the bottom line here, that is the total budget for the project that was approved by City Council in the 2021 budget. So that is $2,150,000. And I have some good news on those numbers when we get to the regular session tonight about awarding those contracts, because we did come in a little bit under that number. But again, all these contributions will be significant and allow this project to move forward into the bid. Next slide. And really, I just want to highlight three agreements. Obviously, when we work through these IGAs, you'll see a lot of agreements in the language if you look all the way through it. But really, the three big agreements, the city agrees that these districts' contributions shall not create any responsibility or liability with respect to the project. It's really the sole responsibility of the facility. Makes sense, right? It's a city project. We're bidding out, we're managing it. It's just a contribution. We're not expecting the metro districts to come in and help us do management of this project. The city agrees it will repay the district their contribution in full in the event the city fails to complete reconstruction of the project as evidenced by the city's preliminary acceptance of the work by December 31st, 2021. Again, if for some reason something changed with the project and we didn't actually proceed with it, we would basically repay that contribution. We did put it all the way to the end of the year. We anticipate having this project done early in the summer. And again, I'll have more information, but this, that December is worst case scenario, but we don't anticipate getting there. And then finally, the city agrees and acknowledges that this contribution is a one-time contribution for the 2021 asphalt overlay project. So all this contribution would go directly to this project. So with that, next slide, which I believe is questions. So yes, any questions on any of these IGAs or the process? And again, I'm going to be sending tonight both of the concrete and asphalt overlay contracts for consideration tonight for award.
Yeah, Justin, don't tease us with potential good news. I mean, it's all I can do. If we weren't running so behind in study session, I'd make you tell us. So no, thank you. I think it was a very thorough presentation. I want to quickly run through and make sure council members don't have any questions. I know council members and I have tremendous gratitude for our Metro District partners. When you rely on mill levies and property taxes to bring in your revenue streams, we learned with COVID, it's a much more steady return than it is for the city with sales tax. So we are so fortunate to have the Metro Districts and their willingness to partner. So we're not taking additional monies out of reserves to do this important project. But quickly, Councilmember Anderson, any quick comments or thoughts?
None here, thank you.
Councilmember Carpenter?
No, just gratitude and appreciation for our partners. And every time I drive on Lincoln, I'm reminded how urgent that project is. Absolutely.
Councilmember Shaw?
Nothing in addition to add, just gratitude.
We'll be gushing with thanks at council meetings. So we'll quickly get through to our next study session agenda item. And that is thank you, Justin, for that presentation. Look forward to hearing more. Local natural hazards mitigation plan update. I hate the sound of hazards, but I do love hearing Bill Medina's name associated with it. So I feel like we're in good hands. All right, our Administrative Services Director is going to talk to us about our hazard mitigation plan. Bill, I'm going to be afraid to hear from you pretty soon with this keeps up. Go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. So just want to give you a quick update on where we are in the planning process. In terms of the staff that's involved from the city, this is primarily police department, community development, public works, and I've been helping in the process as well. So if we go to the next slide, the reason that we're bringing this to you today is that the county plan is going to be going out for public comment soon. So just wanted to provide you a quick update on where we are in the planning process in the event that you do get any questions about it. And we also want to discuss a recommendation that the city begin participating in the community rating system, which has to do with flood standards. And I'll describe that in a little bit more detail as we move on in the presentation. Next slide, please. So just to give you an overview of the plan itself, this is a county plan that has participation from local jurisdictions and special districts. It goes through a major revision every 5 years, and we can choose to update it annually if there are certain actions that we want to address in the nearer term. It meets requirements established by the federal government in the Disaster Mitigation Act of 2000, and it also allows us to apply for FEMA pre-disaster mitigation and hazard mitigation grant programs. So there is potential benefit to the city here by participating in this planning process. So on the next slide, we'll go over just a little bit about what the plan contains. So the planning team from the county and all of the municipalities and special districts went through and developed 8 county mitigation plan goals and 26 associated objectives. Each of the municipalities and jurisdictions went through and updated their jurisdiction profile, talking about demographics, the development that's going on, growth trends, all those kinds of things. And then each jurisdiction also went through and did a natural hazard event history to identify where those areas have experienced significant loss or had emergency declarations. Fortunately for us, the only one in the last 5 years was the 2020 pandemic, although significant. And then we went through a process of ranking the hazards, and I'll show you what those rankings came out to be. And then the last part of the program is identifying mitigation actions that the city plans on taking in the coming planning period, which is a 5-year period that we're looking at. So if we go to the next slide, these are how we came out with the hazard risk ranking for the city of Lone Tree. And I should have said up front that the county has contracted with a firm that helps us through this planning process. So they used some maps and some modeling in order to come up with what the risk ranking was for the city of Lone Tree based on historical events and geography, demography. And then we took a look at that as a planning team and adjusted a few of them. So the rankings are based on the probability of occurrence as well as the impact to property, people, and the economy. And so, as you can see, I think probably in the last plan, pandemic certainly was not ranked so high, but we certainly see what the impact of that has been. So we can go to the next slide. So what we've done as a planning team is we took a look at the 5 actions that were contained in the previous plan, and we thought that they all warranted being carried over into the current plan that we're proposing. So these are kind of ongoing efforts that have to do with code enforcement, making sure that our zoning is correct, making sure that we are prepared for significant events. So each of these actions we can tie back to specific things that we're doing as a city staff, and potentially some of the larger ones we can apply for grant funding in order to help support them. So we go to the next slide. The last thing I wanted to cover was the community rating system. So this is a voluntary incentive program that looks at communities who take exceptional measures to protect their community from flood. And currently the city does not participate in the program. The benefits of participating in the program are discounted flood insurance for residents, and also just a status as a community that goes above and beyond the expected standards. In terms of cost to participate in the program, this would really just be about staff costs. We are doing all the things that we need to do to be a participant in the program. We just have not submitted our application. So it would be rather minimal, and we do recommend that it's an additional measure that we can take to show that we are going above and beyond.
Bill, can I just interrupt there to understand that program a little bit more? The National Flood Insurance Program. So once and I think agree with everything you said, makes good sense. We're doing all the good work anyway. We might as well get the acknowledgement for it. Then our residents would automatically be qualified. Every insurer that provides flood insurance acknowledges and does give a discount for this program, or is it just some do?
Mayor, I am not completely positive with the answer to that question.
Okay,
but we'll find out.
Thanks. I just was curious. Thank you.
So in terms of next steps, we'll go to the last slide, please. In terms of next steps, we will be bringing this back to you sometime in March. The county is going to, as I said, is going to send it out for public comment. We'll take those comments and adjudicate them, and we'll bring it back to you in March for consideration for adoption. The last time that the plan was adopted was in February of 2016, and in this go around, we have our own separate annex for the city of Lone Tree within the plan. Now it's a huge document. It's 600. The current plan is 635 pages. So there's a lot of planning that has gone into this. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Thanks. I want to open up for Council Mike, Councilmember Anderson, questions?
No, it doesn't sound like there's any downside risk. Is there anything on the downside, Bill?
No, I mean, this is really just a revision of an existing plan, and I think we've put a little bit more, the format has been changed, so we put a little bit more thought into certain areas of it that maybe were a little light last time around.
Thank you.
Councilmember Shaw?
No real questions. I am very pleased that we've done the review and we'll be updating the plan, and I'm always a fan of emergency planning and hazard mitigation and all of those things about being prepared. So I just appreciate the work that's being done. It's always worthwhile.
Thanks. Councilmember Carpenter.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. I sleep a little better at night knowing that you're got your finger on the pulse of all these, and I think it's somewhat surprising when you think about it. You know, a couple of years ago, I guess it was, when you came on board, all these potential hazards that were out there that we're starting to see as realities. So I like the fact that we're being proactive. So thanks for all your work on it.
Yeah, let's blame Bill for everything. Hey, I actually, could you go back a couple slides to the list of threats and the ranked order of the threats? I just had a question. Thank you very much. So from the city's perspective, and just this is so parochial, Lone Tree, I'm just curious why transportation accidents maybe weren't a little higher, just in the sense with the responsibility for I-25 and 470. Everybody's comfortable with, like, I mean, I look at potential, what happened in Greenwood Village on that one stretch of freeway a couple different times with the fire truck, excuse me, it was an oil truck explosion and those types of things. So I just want to make sure that the plan is adequately addressing the transportation accidents one. That to me, I would think would be, I know it's the same ranking as floods. I think there's much more likelihood of a transportation accident causing major disruption and damage to the city than a flood, but maybe I'm naive there.
Yeah, I mean, Mayor, they you know, in terms of scoring, they came out the same. You know, with the same ranking, it's kind of deceptive because there's more than one number 4. But one of the things that we're looking at here is we're looking at both the probability coupled with the harm to property, people, and the economic impact. So while a hazmat incident on I-25 would be a significant event, it would not last months, like the pandemic has, for example.
Yeah, that clearly gets a 30. I guess my question was more about, you know, the wildfire hail, but I appreciate your comments regarding property, you know, impact on property. I mean, it probably wouldn't have the same impact on property in the city as some of the others. I think it's the city's response to that. So the city action required to deal with these hazards, in my opinion, is much higher with the transportation accident and hazmat issue on one of our freeways than it potentially would be with a hail incident, for example. Yeah, but it's not just city perspective here. It's correct.
Yeah. Yes. So, you know, and looking at who has responsibility for I-25 and 470, while the cities certainly would have a role, there's other jurisdictions that have responsibility as well. So. Okay.
Thank you for that. I'm looking forward to the next round of briefings on it. All right. And Bill, you're still up on the COVID update, and we got some good news today. So yay.
All right, so a quick COVID update. If we can go to the next slide, we'll address the metrics as they currently exist. This is old hat for all of you now. As you can see on the incident rate, this is supposed to be orange. That's the closest I could get. But we are moving in the right direction. We are continually moving down, which is a good thing. In terms of positivity at 5.8, that's a pretty good place to be. As you can see, the trend has also been significantly downward. And of course, the good news story continues to be hospitalizations. where, as Dr. Douglas stated today, the county has 41% of ICU capacity available. So we're in a very, very good position when it comes to hospital capacity. So if we go to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about vaccinations. So as I'm sure most of you know, this week the governor released a new plan for vaccinations, or I should say he modified the existing plan. So we've added category 1B2, which will vaccinate those between ages of 65 and 69. It will give it our K through 12 educators, and then it has the state government personnel in there as well, which will begin on February 8th, right? So that's just right around the corner. So frontline essential workers are still included, well, are now included in what is now being called 1B3. We've also included personnel that are age 60 to 64 with 2 or more risk factors as identified by the CDC. And this group of individuals is estimated to get their vaccinations beginning on March 5th. And then within phase 2, some of it has changed. We've added a category for individuals between 16 and 59 with 1 risk factor. And then, of course, this is where the majority of state and local government employees fall. Good news is that the police department, half of them got their 2nd dose today, and the next half will get their 2nd dose next week. So that is good news. If we go to the next slide, some of you may have seen this in the chart in the briefing that the governor gave, and I don't want to go through all the details here, but the kind of the highlights that I want to provide to you all is that the data on the vaccines available and who is getting administered them is being very closely followed. So as you can see on these dials here, all this area over on the left-hand side of the dials at the bottom are tracking those folks that are in phase 1A. And then to the right of the horizontal line in the dials below are all the folks that are in phase 1, in a portion of phase 1B. So I think the comforting thing about here is the state has a plan. They're closely monitoring how the vaccines are getting distributed, and when adjustments need to be made, they are adjusting. So I think that's a very positive message. Let's go to the next slide. And then the last one is the update on what's going to happen with the public health order. So we have heard that there's going to be a public health order potentially released tomorrow, and it's going to be called the Dial 2.0. So they're going to lower incident rates at all levels. And essentially they're going to start using a 7-day average as opposed to a 14. So essentially, we're more than doubling the incident rates that are allowable at each level of the dial. But they've made the positivity rate more restrictive. So the positivity rate for yellow is no more than 7.5, and for orange is no more than 10. So if we were to, as of today, we meet the metrics for level yellow, if this is how the new public health order is published. Now the question is do we have to wait 7 days after it's published before we actually move to level yellow? That is still unclear, and we'll wait to see what the public health order says. They said that in March, sometime probably towards the middle of the month, they're going to be issuing a new update to the Dial 3.0, and this one is going to account for the fact that by this time we will have a vast majority of the very high-risk populations vaccinated. So that will potentially allow for some more opening of the economy. And then Dial 4.0 sometime in the summer, and that will be to recognize the fact that the vaccine is available to the general public, and hopefully by then we'll have a vast majority of the population vaccinated and on our way to that elusive herd immunity that we've all heard about. So with that, I think that's all I had. Are there any questions?
Thanks, Bill. Like quickly run through council and Councilmember Shaw, questions?
None here, thank you.
Councilmember Anderson, questions?
Thanks for the update, Bill.
And Councilmember Carpenter.
Thanks for the update, and we're headed in the right direction, so thanks.
Yes, yes, keep rowing in that direction. Absolutely. Thank you, Bill, for your good work deciphering all of it and making it a little bit simpler for us. We appreciate you keeping it up with all of it for us. All right, guys, next I want to quickly review our consent agenda, which includes minutes from our January 19th regular meeting and claims for January 12th through January 25th of 2021. Are there any questions from council on consent? Okay, well, seeing none, that concludes our formal study session agenda for this evening. I'm going to quickly check in with Seth. This is the earliest we finished. Our city manager, is there anything else of note that was not on our formal agenda?
Nope. Thank you for checking.
Okay, wonderful. We have got an extended dinner break. I hope you're all really happy, but would love to see everybody back on about 6:45 so we can get ready for our council meeting this evening. And again, thanks to everyone for tuning in and participating, and thanks for the great staff work. So we'll see you back here in about a half an hour, 40 minutes, guys. Thank you.